It's happening to people at work. In fact, there are people that actually got vaccinated and still lost their jobs. And one such person is Dr. Ben Bishop. You can catch him at benjbishop.com. Dr. Ben Bishop is a fully vaccinated professor who was fired for violating, quote unquote, the University of Scranton's vaccine policy, or vaccination policy, I should say. And this started back in August of 2022. So I'm going to let him tell that story because we've got Dr. Ben Bishop with us right now. Doctor, welcome to the program, sir.
Thanks for having me.
You bet.
So I could just tell you, this policy, I had some issues with it. The complaints that you often hear with bodily autonomy, privacy, those were important to me. But you also have sort of special circumstances within academia. So, if you're talking about vaccinating perhaps unwilling 20-somethings who are healthy, those are vaccines that you can't use for, 80-year-old diabetics that, maybe actually need it, but happen to be in the developing world. So that was a concern of mine. And also the way that the policy at Scranton is implemented, they have a provision where they're asking faculty and students to turn in one another for violations of the policy. And, so I had some concerns about that. And so I chose not to adhere to the policy. I didn't disclose my status, even though I was in fact vaccinated. And, there's some differing viewpoints as to, why I was fired. I see it as retaliation against a critic because I had publicly criticized these policies. And the university, claims that it was because I violated this policy and I was a danger to the health and safety of campus, which being vaccinated is not true, but that's the claim.
All right. So tell me how did they justify? I mean, I didn't know it was, and I'm not going to say easy, but you don't typically see tenured professors getting fired. So I think that's a bit of an anomaly. And B, how do they support the idea of saying, well, we're letting you go because, you violated our vaccination policy, but you've been a public critic of theirs and you are vaccinated. So how do they reconcile the facts when they're not in their favor?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't disclose the fact that I am vaccinated. And, in terms of like the overall big picture, I happen to have conservative viewpoints, and I was actually the
That's
third.
why they fired you.
Well, it depends on who you ask, right? I'm sure the university would have a different perspective, but there were actually two other, an associate dean and the director of our humanities center, that were both forced out roughly the same time. So it's, conservatives in academia, we're sort of an endangered species these days. And so, I have concerns about that as well. But in terms of the actual process, there's a lot of formality that you have to go through to fire a tenured professor. And, the claim was that my silence by not responding, I was told you have to attest to your vaccine status. And if you don't, basically they charged me with professional misconduct. And then there's this sort of kangaroo court process you go through. I was actually barred from the hearing because I was a danger to campus. So they wouldn't allow me to come and also not participate remotely, interestingly. So that was the situation there. So I'm hoping with the lawsuit to be able to, maybe have a chance to defend myself.
Now, one of the administrators, the provost, Jeffrey Gingerich, he had some choice words for you, it seems. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, we've had a sort of long dialogue. I mean, he did make the statement that he viewed me as a danger to the health and safety of campus. So, I think that was probably one of the motivations, at least, reading the transcript of the hearing. Of course, I couldn't be there, but reading the transcript, it seemed that was something that was very important to the participants, is that they, assumed that I was dangerous because I chose not to disclose that information. I guess from my perspective, the university, they made a statement early on that they expected faculty to set an example of compliance for students with this policy. And I really view that as an academic freedom issue because, you're talking about what sort of mentoring are you going to do to these students? And in my in the case of my students, these are people that are going off to defense contractors. They're going to work for government agencies. And to me, it's scary to encourage these students, to participate in this sort of miniature police state where they're turning in other people. You're teaching them blind obedience to authority. I mean, in my professional judgment, these are like dangerous lessons to be teaching students. And so, I view it as an academic freedom issue that I don't want to teach these lessons to my students. And if they're going to fire me, let them fire me.
Right. Well put, Doc. We are just about out of time, but I want to continue this conversation if you'll come back, if you'll make time for us. We're live at night, and I'd love to hear the outcome of this lawsuit or if there's an update coming soon. Folks, we're on with Dr. Ben Bishop. He's a professor of computer science at Scranton University, or was, until he was unceremoniously dismissed for complying with their policy, although not initially, and he is fully vaccinated. benjbishop.com is his website. Dr. Bishop, excellent conversation. I wish we had another segment to keep you on, but we're already packed out for the rest of the night. But I do want to wish you a happy Thanksgiving, and thank you for joining us to share a little bit about your current story.
All right. Thanks for having me.
You bet.